I just bought this broken Canon C300 cinema camera for $369, which is a fraction of the price that this is worth in decent working condition. And so in today's video, I'm gonna tear this thing apart, try to diagnose what's wrong with it and get it fixed. So hopefully we can have ourselves a fully working Canon cinema camera for under 400 bucks. Now, if you haven't seen part 1 to this series yet, I would definitely watch that first so you kind of understand all the context behind this specific camera. Because in this video, I'm pretty much just gonna jump right into the diagnosis and repair of this camera. But in the last video, I kind of went over everything else, like buying this camera, unboxing it, and just going over the main issue with it. And so again, if you haven't seen that, you're gonna wanna watch it to kind of understand all the context. But for everybody else, let's go ahead and get this thing torn apart and see what's going on with it. And so really the big question I had with this camera was, are the lines being recorded in the video or are they just part of the video outputs to where I could just kind of work around them and not have to worry about it as much? Now, if you watched all the way up until the end of the last video, you saw that the lines are definitely being recorded into the camera, which kind of sucks. It might mean it's a little bit of a deeper issue than I first thought it was. But I do have a couple ideas and a couple things that I want to try, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, so I picked up some off-brand Wasabi power batteries and a charger from Amazon for like 50 or 60 bucks. Got them charged up, and now I want to test a theory. So every time I've powered this camera up so far, at first there's no issues, there's no lines on the screen, there's no glitching or anything like that. But after having it on for a little bit and just scrolling through the menus and doing testing, whatever I've been doing with it, they'll start to show up after it's on for a little while. And so the theory I want to test is possibly, it could be a temperature issue to where after the camera's on for a certain amount of time, if there's, say a fan issue or if there's a bunch of dust blocking something, it gets to a certain temperature after being on to where it just starts to cause issues with the sensor or, with a specific component in the camera. Now, hypothetically, that would be a pretty good scenario because hopefully I could clean it out or maybe replace the fan or something like that and, kind of find the issue from there, if it is an issue caused with just the camera getting too hot. Now, I also want to give this thing a really good clean, maybe put the port covers back on and everything like that, and just clean it up a little bit. So while I'm doing that, I'm actually going to test this out. I'm just going to time how long it takes from powering it on for the first time after sitting for a while, how long it takes for the lines to start showing up, and then what I'm going to do is just put a fan directly on this, maybe turn the AC on, just get the ambient temperature as cool as I can, and then run the test again after it's been cooled off all the way, and just see if there's a difference in time before the lines start to show up. Alright, we got a fresh, fully charged battery in there. I'm gonna go ahead and power this on and then start the stopwatch, and we're gonna see how long it takes for these lines to show up on this. And so right now it's about 68 degrees Fahrenheit in here, and then we'll run the next test and put a fan on it and cool it off even more in here. Alright, so here we go, let's power this up. Alright, we're at 32 minutes and it's still going strong. There's no issues yet at all. And it feels pretty warm, so it's definitely starting to heat up. And I mean, again, 32 minutes. It's been recording during this for about half the time, but it has stopped recording on its own a couple times. I don't know if that's because it's getting too hot and just has to stop recording because the fan actually turns off when you start recording, because I'm sure it probably shouldn't automatically just stop recording randomly like that normally. So I'm not sure why it's doing that, but still we're at 33 minutes with absolutely no issues yet. So I'm just gonna keep going and see what happens. Alright, we're at over an hour of this camera being on, an hour and 6 minutes of it being continuously on, and then it looks like 38 minutes of recording time. It kind of stopped recording throughout, and I didn't have it recording at first, but it actually just filled up the card, so I can't record it anymore. Over an hour and 6 minutes. I think at this point, I'm gonna call it that it's not anything to do with heat, or something like the fan being clogged up and the camera getting too hot, because it's been on the whole time. When it records, the fan shuts off and everything like that. It feels pretty warm, which is normal, but there's no issue at all. This whole time, it hasn't popped up once. And so at this point, I'm almost thinking maybe it's been sitting in this exact spot this entire time. I kind of want to try picking it up, moving it around, maybe just lightly shaking it around a little bit, and seeing if the issue happens then, maybe if, it starts to move around a little bit. And then at that point, I might lean more towards some sort of connection issue, internally in the camera or something like that. And so I've been planning on still opening this camera up. I'm just trying to learn as much as I can before I do that. Okay, we're at just over 3 hours. I haven't been recording, but I've decided just to leave it on as long as it'll last. And I just started to notice some stuff popping up on the screen. So you can see it's just slightly showing up on the bottom there. It's actually creeping its way up a little bit. Now, I haven't looked over at this in probably 20 minutes to a half hour, so it could have been anywhere from probably 2.5 to 3 hours in, but it's starting to finally show some signs. You can actually see it's starting to creep its way up here even more. Now, I've never really seen it past the bottom half of the screen here, but of course it does record into the video either way, so it's still pretty important to not have there. But we are finally getting something. Now, the issue is I still haven't come up with any conclusion based on this test. Honestly, I mean, it's been so long that I don't think it's heat related. If anything, I turned the AC on a little while ago. I'm pretty sure I can conclude that it has nothing to do with heat at this point. But I guess I don't want to say happy, but I'm kind of satisfied that these are showing up now, because I was a little confused that for almost 3 hours, the whole camera just worked fine. But we finally got lines showing up, so I'm just gonna go ahead and conclude this test after just over 3 hours of keeping this thing on continuously. So we still got lots to test. I know one of the next steps is just gonna be to pull this thing apart and just look for any corrosion or anything that just looks out of place, loose connections, solder points, just things like that. That's probably gonna be the next step realistically, but I'll get back to you once I just try a few more things, maybe, power it off, start it up a few more times. Either way, I'll keep you updated. All right, so I just powered it on today, and right off the bat, it is all over the place. This is definitely the worst I've ever seen it. It's all over the screen. Sometimes it'll glitch and the whole screen will freeze. And I'm actually noticing the darker the image gets, the worse it gets. So, if I put it at a bright light right here, it actually completely stopped right now because it's completely, overexposed. But as soon as it gets darker, it'll just start going crazy, and the darker it gets, the worse it'll get. So if I go ahead and just fully block it right here, looks like there's lines all over the place. Now it's like totally glitching and the whole top half of the screen is like frozen. And then there we go, it kind of goes back to normal. But also, of course, I wasn't recording when it happened, but it was really bad like this. I just gave it a little shake and it just completely stopped for a second, and it ended up coming back after I moved it a little more. And so that kind of makes me still lean towards some sort of a loose connection somewhere inside of the camera here. I don't know if it'd be where the sensor attaches to something or somewhere on the motherboard. So I think my next step is just going to be to open this thing up. I think that's what we're going to do next. Now, I've been looking online for teardowns of a C300 or, any tutorials for taking this thing apart, and I haven't really seen anything about it online. And so I think I'm going to be going into this teardown pretty much completely blind, so I'm going to do my best not to break this thing. But I guess let's go ahead and tear this thing down and look for anything that looks somewhat out of place or abnormal and go from there. This camera is definitely a lot more complex and a lot more tightly packed together than the Arri Alexas were. It's honestly my biggest worry during this isn't breaking something, it's just remembering where all the screws and all the parts and pieces go. I swear pretty much every screw is a slightly different length, and there's just so many tight little spots that all these screws go. But so far I haven't touched any of the electronics, I haven't taken any of that stuff off or apart yet. But there is a ton of cables and connectors and things that are exposed at this point. And so my goal was to try to get this thing powered up how it is right now, and then just see if I notice anything, try to maybe just move connectors and cables around, a really small amount without breaking them. And just seeing if I can do anything at this point. Because again, in the grand scheme of things, I'm not even that deep into this, and I already have so many parts and pieces and little screws and little things all over the place that I have to try to remember where they're at. So I'm gonna try to do as much as I can while, tearing this apart as least as I can. I just tried powering this up. I connected everything how I should. Nothing is out of place or abnormal, but there is absolutely no power to it. There wasn't a sound, the fan didn't turn on. Nothing at all happened when I flipped this on. And so at this point, I'm trying to figure out if there's some sort of kill switch or safety mechanism somewhere to where when one of these screws or panels are taken off, it just doesn't let the camera start. Because I'm 95% certain I didn't touch or mess with or even have really a chance of breaking any of the electronics in this, so I'm really not sure why it's not just powering up like normal. But I did notice a few things that I'll show you real quick. So there's this little guy right here that looks like a normal screw, but it actually gets pushed in. It's almost like it's this little switch. And then this panel right here is the one that went over top of that. And so basically this screw right here will go right into that, and then this little nub pushes in on that. And so I'm kind of wondering if that is one of those little kill switches. so that when you pull this off or pull that side panel off. So I'm gonna try hooking it up and pushing that in and then trying to power on and see what happens then. Again, there's no electronics disconnected or removed. Everything that's taken off is just plastic panels for the most part. So it should hypothetically still power on and work fine like this. But of course, there's only one way to find out. So let's go ahead and try that out. All right, then we got the top monitor unit right here. I'll just plug that in. There's a battery in the camera. The monitor's plugged in and hooked up. At this point, it should power up. So I'm gonna try it real quick. Yeah, I didn't hear anything, nothing on the screen. The battery's fully in, I don't see any lights or any signs of power, so let's turn it off. And then the little button thing, I'm gonna go ahead and press in, and then try to power it up again, and we'll see what happens. Also, it's thunderstorming right now, so I apologize if you hear a bunch of thunder in the background. No, still nothing. All right. I'm still not getting any power from it. I really don't know why and what's going on with it for why it's not powering on all of a sudden. So at this point, I guess I gotta figure out my next step. I really want to figure out how to get this powered on or make sure something didn't happen with it while I was pulling these panels apart. So I don't know if I should just maybe start putting a couple of the screws back in one by one and just see at what point I can get this to power up. But I'm also gonna keep looking around and just, I guess, trying different things. I really don't know what would be causing this, to be honest. You know, obviously besides if I just, without realizing it, I slipped and pulled something or disconnected something. Again, I really don't think so. I haven't even touched any of the circuit boards. I haven't touched any of the connectors. I haven't done anything like that yet. And so that's just why I'm so confused about this right now. You know, if I knew I broke something, then it'd be a whole different story, but I really just don't know what happened. And so I'm just gonna keep messing around with this, and I'll keep updating you as soon as I figure something else out. But yeah, I'll just keep tinkering around, see what I can do. Alright, so I've been working on some other projects, and I've pretty much just been letting this thing sit without any battery, without any power going to it for about a week now. I'm not really expecting much, but I figured while I'm working on other projects, I would just not touch it, not supply any power to it, and just let it sit and see what happens. And I also picked up this power supply for it, so I can provide constant DC input and not have to worry about the batteries. And again, this will also be just another little test to see if it has anything to do with the battery power. Now, I also want to give a big shout out to George from CNC Timelapse for helping me brainstorm a bunch of ideas for what could be going on with this, and helping me come up with a bunch of ideas and possibilities and things that I should look into. And I also want to thank everybody else that's dropped ideas down in the comments. I've taken all those into account, wrote all of them down to, you know, test out and see if they work. And so at this point, I'm just going to open this thing back up, try out some more ideas, and just hope we can get this thing up and going again. All right, it's been a while, probably a few months at this point, and I kind of got distracted by other projects and other things, and this has kind of just sat on the back burner. Now, I have still put quite a bit of time into trying to diagnose this and stuff. I just haven't really filmed a lot of it. You know, every time I got a few minutes, I would just dive into this thing and keep trying to figure out what's going on with it. And I think, you know, with my fairly limited experience in electronics diagnosis and repair, I'm kind of just at a stopping point. I really don't know where else to go from here. And I think it's just time for me to wrap this project up for now. Now, there is kind of a bright side to this project, being that this camera came with this monitor unit right here, the original Canon monitor unit, which is the perfect exact model for the C500, which of course, if you've seen it, is the other kind of unknown random camera that I bought that ended up working perfect. It just didn't have a top monitor unit. And so I at least kind of got something out of this, you know, a fully working monitor unit for my C500 now. But it is still kind of disappointing that I really just never got anywhere with this camera. But basically, I think I'm just gonna wrap this project up for now and keep holding on to this camera just in case something happens in the future. I get some new information. Maybe I'll just need parts from this for something else. But for now, I think this wraps up the broken C300 project. I hope you enjoyed this series, and I apologize that I really couldn't get anywhere with this. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.